Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 85th edition of the Frankenstein Chat, the first of 2022. And as you can see, we've got Emma Ainsworth back as coming back a second time as our guest today. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Frank. Hi, Stan.
Yes, lovely to have
Hello.
you. And how are you this morning, Stan?
Coming to the end of my cold now that I had on New Year's Eve. Did manage to get out New Year's Eve and then sort of sat there waiting to see if we'd caught anything since, so, but apparently not. So clear on lateral flows, so feeling quite good.
Good, good. Emma,
So
for
my,
those
my
who
wife
didn't
said she
see,
thought she was getting a cold this morning, so that could be.
oh,
Don't
mm.
go anywhere near her, Stan. Put her in a separate room.
Emma, those who didn't watch out your first appearance on the Frankenstein Chat, do you want to just tell everybody who you are and how we know each other?
Yeah, so my name's Emma. I am a principal business architect at the Co-op, but I'm also chair of governors for Parkland, which is part of the Co-op Academy Trust that Frank convinced me to do without me really realising that that's happening. So I've been chair of governors for, as long as COVID's been going.
Right, gosh,
Actually,
going on for 2 years.
my first meeting was just as lockdown hit.
Oh, wow. Do you know that title though that you talk about in the co-op? I think you use that phrase as if everybody knows what that means. But
Yeah.
I always people say to me, well, what does that actually mean? I always think, oh, I'm not quite sure, but I think it's something. Well, you tell us what it means.
I've been a business architect.
Yeah,
So my job is all about designing organizations and trying to make them sustainable. So looking at, they call it the operating model, but it's about how the teams are put together, the culture, the practices, the behaviors, and then things about the structure and how they line into different leadership, and then how you make that sustainable and cost effective for the future.
right.
So it's fun. A lot of our time spent kind of looking at what's the strategy for that area of the organization, how are they going to deliver it, and have they got the capabilities that they need to deliver it, and if not, how do you support them to make it better?
Right. So is that done? I mean, the co-op's broken down into various segments. So this is segment driven, is it, or is it sort of like across the co-op?
Yeah, we do it across the co-op. So we
Right.
might focus on specific business areas, so like co-op power or the food business or the funeral care business, but then you can do it at a lower level as well. So saying, what's the service that technology needs to deliver, and how do we make sure that it's set up to do that in the right way? And are we, using the right practices? So do we deliver things in an agile or a waterfall way? What are the team dynamics like? All that kind of stuff to help the leadership to kind of set it up in the right way so that it works.
How helpful has that been, in terms of your role as a as chair of governors?
It's been really useful. It's been fascinating when it comes to all the strategy bits. So most organizations will have a strategy where they say, we've got kind of 3 pillars and everything lumps into them. And then when you get down to the actual people doing the work, they go, I've got no idea what I'm doing. So a lot of my work is about kind of saying, right, if we can only do 4 or 5 things, what are the really important
Right.
ones? And how do we make sure that all the team understand how they contribute to the overall success? So that's been really good for Parkland, I think, because we've helped Michelle, our head teacher, and the rest of the kind of governing body to say we've got to strip it back and make it really simple and make sure everybody understands it, and then go after it and see where we get to.
Brilliant, brilliant. That sounds so straightforward, doesn't it, Stan?
Yeah, no, that's
It's not that hard.
No, and we talk, we
but
say
that's a real interest of mine, organizational culture and how it impacts on
yeah.
the sustainability of organizations. That's something I am genuinely interested in.
Yeah.
Always happy to chat about it, Frank. It's
Oh.
really
Well, let's. Well, here we are, Stan. Keep going, keep going. What's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, it's what's caught my eye this morning, really. Excuse me, I haven't got rid of this cold, have I? It's Conservative MP Andrew Rosendale, who thinks the BBC should once again play the national anthem at the end of broadcast, which is a bit strange because I don't think they do end the broadcast, but he thinks there is a time where that, and ITV before news at 10 should play the national anthem. And in the debate today on the TV, it went a bit further to say that we're not doing this in schools, and schools should be learning the words to the national anthem to sort of put our Britishness together. So I thought, well, let's have a look at what the words are to the national anthem. And really quite interesting. We only sing 2 verses. And there's not much about the nation in those two to make it national. It's a lot about the Queen. But a verse that was added in the 1700s, and now it says on the paper I looked at, it says often omitted, is Lord grant that Marshal Wade may bring thy mighty aid, victory bring. May he sedation hush, and like a torrent rush, rebellious Scots to crush. God save the Queen. So that'll keep our Britishness really tight, I think, if we're just crushing the Scots. And then there was a version during the I think it must have been after the change in Catholics and Protestants to really have a go at the Catholic faith. From France and pretender, Great Britain defender, foes let them fall. From foreign slavery, priests and their knavery, and popish reverie, God save us all. So,
I mean, it's a really inclusive song, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's going to do the nation really, really well. Just throw that in every day.
But the current verse 2 is actually would put our government at risk, because it says, "O Lord our God, arise, scatter our enemies and make them fall, confound their politics, frustrate their knavish tricks. On thee our hopes we fix, God save us all."
But
we're a bit awkward now, aren't we? Let's be honest.
I know. Well, I mean, what was disappointing was when he mentioned it in Parliament, is that the Culture Secretary, really immediately endorsed it, because it wasn't something that had any time for it to be considered. It was just a question, and because it was jingoistic, that was a really good idea. I mean, it's funny. I'm old enough to remember when the BBC ended at night.
Yeah.
And it used to just come down into a sort of black hole. It was like the whole BBC was sort of like drifted into the television, As a young child, that's what I thought. They all went to sleep somewhere in the television, and then in the morning, it was never on in the morning. At lunchtime, when you got some children's TV on, suddenly they all came out again, But actually,
but what happened, Frank? Because I'm as old as you. No, I'm not quite as old as you, I don't think. But
well,
we'll not get on that.
Don't. I remember that. I mean, that was the time to turn the TV off when that started, and the same thing, and this maybe even longer ago, happened in the cinema. That when the film's finished, they played the national anthem, and everyone stood. So the thing was, as the credits went, you made your bolt for the door. Otherwise, you were stood for the next 10 minutes. So if that's the reality of it, that you play something that people try to avoid, it's not going to work. I do think there's a case for a new national anthem, and one that schools could engage with. But it's got to be very different from the existing.
Especially with everything that we're talking about around systemic racism and recognizing how negative the impacts of everything within our history are, and how completely divided it's made the country. Singing a song that has been emblematic of that for generations is probably not the way to try and bring
no. So he's asked that all schools sing it, is it?
No, he's not said that. That was the development in the debate this morning on the news.
It's really weird. When I was a head, I had a flagpole at the front of the school, which was never used, and I resurrected it. What happened was I got a local company to come and take the flagpole down because it was sort of hinged, but they dropped it as it was coming down. They couldn't hold it, and so this flagpole was then sort of like at an angle, But anyway, it had a flag, and it had a British flag, the Union Jack up on it, and but then parents wanted it to be rotated. So there were those that were sort of very EU and wanted the EU flag. There were those that were English, and then there was a couple of Welsh. When they realised that the English flag was up, they then wanted the Welsh flag, And actually, there was no pleasing anybody, on it.
No.
It was probably one of the most divisive things I did. I should just left the thing there, but actually that good attempt turned out to be quite a problem in trying to manage it.
I do think the risk is that being patriotic has been sort of snatched by the right end of politics, and the flag and things like that. And I do think I'm quite a fan of the flag. I toyed with the idea of having a flagpole when I was ahead, but we had a particular governor who would have had us all out saluting it as it went up every day. So I didn't want to go quite that far. But I think there is something to be said about some. I don't want to be patriotic to be blind, you can see that in America, but some element of being proud of our values and our beliefs might be something we should be thinking about.
What were you going to say, Emma?
I think to kind of build on Stan's point, I wonder whether it's something that, if you are going to have a flagpole, you have it around the vision and beliefs that you've got and the practices that you've got within your schools as well. So it's not just about the nation, but it's about what your school stands for.
Mhm.
Because, especially when it comes to things like the co-op values, that makes such a difference within school, and they really start to understand it and live it and breathe it and explain, explaining that to the rest of the community and making them part of it as well, I think would be a really positive thing, because there's such a divided perspective on the history of the country. But actually, we're trying to move it forward, and let's say, right, we recognise there's a problem. What can we do now to start afresh and to do something that's positive for everybody?
Yeah. Well, that's a good start, Stan.
Sorry, I should have had my Union Jack behind me.
No, you should have the Union Jack like a politician behind you there, Stan. Go on, Emma, what's caught your eye this week?
So I've seen an article where the Pope has been saying that it's really selfish for everybody to have pets, and they should be having children instead. And I simultaneously burst out laughing and then thought, oh my God, what are we going to do to the birth rate of the country now? Yeah, just utter nonsense.
It's better when adults, actually want the child, and actually have the means to look after the child. And I mean, we say this about pets, don't we? Pets aren't just for Christmas. You've got to think about the relationship you have with them over their lifetime. It seems at times if it's easier, I'm pleased actually teenage pregnancy rates are really low, I mean, compared
because
to,
we can't see each other because of COVID. Well done, COVID.
But compared to where they were at the turn of this century, they're I'm really pleased, that they're much, much lower. But actually, in terms of having children, you want children to be wanted and loved and cared for.
And I don't think we need that systemic pressure, especially on all the challenges that women have now with giving birth. A lot of parents and a lot of families will attest to the fact, even within my generation, they felt like they had to have children to be considered the right couple or a proper woman. And there's a poem called They F You Up Your Parents that is completely right, that says, if your parents have got a load of baggage and they've had a load of trauma, they then pass that on to the next generation, who adds a bit more and then passes it on to the next generation. So how do we kind of break that cycle and say, look, if you want to have children, absolutely, that's something that you should be able to do. But if you don't, you shouldn't be judged for it.
Yes.
It shouldn't just be a case of everybody has a responsibility, because frankly, there's enough people in the world. We don't need to add any extras. I completely support adoption and fostering and all of those different aspects and trying to give a child the best life that you can. But it shouldn't be down to each couple to say, well, we're going to have a child because the Pope's told us to.
It may be a coincidence. It might just be a coincidence that Italy's forecast to drop its population by several million over the next few years. Now, I wouldn't think the Pope would get into that kind of politics, but it might be just a happy coincidence. But I think we maybe need to resurrect that verse.
I know, yeah. It's interesting. We went on holiday to China a few years ago, and somebody we met out there, she talked about, she was in her sort of mid-30s, and she was harassed really by the family about her problem, and her problem was that she wasn't married, and she was not going to be bringing any children, and the pressure was not just on children, it was on marriage as well, and the stigma she had about being, basically, she'd spend a lot of her time in America, understood that her career to her was everything, and she wanted to devote her life to the work she was doing. There was nothing wrong with that, but that was socially unacceptable to many Chinese people,
Yeah.
and the pressure
And
was immense.
I remember being in school and learning about the one child policy and thinking, oh my gosh, but actually, the pressure that puts on people is horrendous, both ways. Of, if you don't want to have children, you're expected to have, but then also if you want to have more children, you couldn't. And it has that unintended consequence of so many young girls were killed because they wanted a boy, because a boy looks after you within that historic culture and looks after, the rest of the family will then look after you. So it managed their population rate to a degree, but it has such horrible consequences that they either didn't care about or didn't think about. It's just, I find it fascinating. A lot of the things that I've been talking to my mum about recently as she deteriorates has been the pressure that she felt to have me. And she's quite openly said, Emma, I didn't want to have children. And I've said, I know that doesn't mean you love me any less, but it's not the life that you wanted for yourself. So I think it's really positive that we're getting to the place now where we can say, do you know what? I don't want children, or I don't know if I'm ready for children, rather than it just being an expectation that you're going to do it. Because if you're not mentally ready for it, I know people that have planned for years and they really still struggle with it. Being a parent isn't easy. It's not just you get the fun bit, 9 months later you pop it out, and then it's great. It's really tough.
I know. Okay, well, what's caught my eye this week is ventilation. Before we had a chat before we recorded, and Stan put me right on the fact that the government have provided, or are trying to provide, 7,000 filter machines. Is that the word? But actually, for those of you who do watch this on a regular basis will know that Philippa Reid was on a few weeks ago, and she's clinically vulnerable. And in a way, she's returning to work on Monday. And so looking at what the risk analysis is going to be, what mitigation. And of course, she's fortunate to have a door straight into her classroom, and she does wear a visor, not a mask. So the thing for me was around, okay, we've got ventilation. The masks ought to be better. I understand that she can't because it's difficult teaching and everything. The kids aren't wearing a mask because she's in a primary school. But what about the filters? And so I followed a guy who's a professor of biophysical chemistry at the University of Bath. So I thought he's probably going to know something about this. So, anyway, the filters he was promoting are the filters that I think the government are providing, but they're actually set at £70 off Amazon, and I can get them delivered to the school on Monday. So it really does, she would need 2 in her classroom, so I'm willing to pay the £140 that she's got the filters in the classroom. But it then made me think, why haven't we done this earlier? Why haven't we identified all the clinically vulnerable staff and just said, right, how many of those have you got? You've got 4. Okay, well, we'll put them on a trolley, and you can take them if they do move from one class to the next, which some of the secondary school teachers do. You can arrange for somebody to do that for you, or you can just change the timetable, make sure that teacher stays in that class all the time with the filter, which is what happens in primary schools. It's beyond me to know why they haven't done that.
Everything just feels so reactive, though, right? It just feels like no one's taken that time to stand still and say, what is the logical thing for us to do, and how do we make it really clear and easy for schools? Because, even within Parkland, and we're only a single form primary, the guidance that you get is nonsense. And then you've got head teachers and leadership teams having to translate what they think that means, which means across the country, you must have thousands of versions of what they think that means to then interpret it for their school. It's scary.
Yeah. And
if the filters are that cheap, to be honest, £140 per classroom, that's not a major expense, is it?
No.
And I think the problem is that the filters that are being, the 7,000 when we think somewhere in the region of 300,000 classrooms, and I think that's an underestimate, are going nowhere, are they?
No.
That's going nowhere. But it's a headline, and as far as some people read it, oh, they've put filters into schools now.
Yeah.
You know,
And
whereas it should have been 2 filters per classroom in every school for the sake of it improves the school longer term.
Well, again, yeah, I mean, because
it's not a negative thing.
I didn't realise that these are good for pollen, for hay fever sufferers as well. So the long-term benefits of this are immeasurable, really. Forget when we're outside the pandemic. This is just improving air quality in classrooms, which I would have thought everybody's going to think for 140 quid, that's probably good value, that.
Yeah. Cheaper than a tutor.
or don't get us onto the 39 billion or whatever, wherever that's gone to. But anyway, so also the other thing, I didn't realize that ultraviolet light kills off these airborne particles as well. I wasn't aware of that. So again, you do wonder, well, has anybody looked into that?
Well, you be careful, Frank, because you go down the rabbit hole that Trump went into, don't you? Where
Bleach.
Injecting people with ultraviolet light. The problem with ultraviolet light is it's not good for us.
No, but if it was used when nobody was in the classroom as a sort of clearing mechanism, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're doing that in hospitals, aren't they? Especially over in America. I mean, hilariously, it was on Grey's Anatomy like 6 months ago saying, oh, isn't it a great idea? So the fact that they've already managed to pick it up and be like, hey, look at this is a concept, and governments around the country haven't really thought about it.
Well,
ironic. It's a very simple way, Frank. There's a UV lamp on the pond filter that kills the bacteria as it goes through the filter. It's just a UV bulb. Is
that all it is?
And that's what it does.
Right.
So yes, it's an answer.
But it makes hollow, doesn't it, the words of politicians who say we've got to keep schools open, we want to make sure that children and staff are safe. What all the measures that could be taken need to be taken into account when those phrases or those statements are made. And you can understand why trade unions, opposition parties feel as though the government hasn't done enough. And if it has, and it always feels as though it's always off the pace. It's never leading the way. It's always when it has to do something, it does something. It always feels as though it's reluctant to do it. And I can't understand when the price of these things is so cheap that we haven't bothered to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
I don't know the full details of this, but I did see on Twitter somebody put a graph of children who've been hospitalized in the last few, and I think it was 127 in one day.
Yes.
Now, I think if at the start of the pandemic 2 years ago, someone had said 127 children per day are ending up in hospital, we'd have had a very different view on how this virus passes through, particularly through primary schools, because we've still got they don't really pass it on, and they don't really get it.
Which isn't true. We've had staff that are off with long COVID that they think they've got it from school, and I've got a number of friends whose little children have got it, and they're not as ill as some of us might be as adults, but they're still poorly, and especially for a primary school child, it's really scary if they don't understand what's going on, and the pressure it puts on schools to remain open and to be the ones that are disseminating all the information is horrendous. I suppose if we looked at the number of incidents that you've got with parents and carers getting aggressive and angry towards teaching staff and towards head teachers, I'm sure it's gone up exponentially, because just as we see within food stores around the country, the violence and the anger is going towards the people at the front line rather than the people that have actually made the decisions.
Yes.
So, we've had to say within the co-op stores that we're not going to be the ones that say, can you put a mask on? Can you do this? Can you do the other? Because we've had people being killed because of it. We've had them being, glassed. It's horrible. But we're expecting school teachers to be doing a very similar role of trying to make sure that kids are following the rules when, at 5-6 years old, they're not going to understand what the rules are.
Yeah. It's interesting the point Stan makes though, isn't it, about we have become sort of used to all of this. You know, it hasn't got the same shock value, has it? Just bin collections. We had a bin collector this week. We used to put sort of little sweets and stuff out. Well, now, I mean, these these guys are just, they're still out there working, still collecting the bins, whereas lots of people can work from home, but they're still out there collecting the bins.
Yeah, I was saying that the other day because I put the bins out, and I said to Jill, do you remember, it wasn't that long ago we were putting like drinks and stuff out to say thank you to the bin men, and I sterilising my hands after I'd put the bin away.
I know.
And we have become desensitized to it because I think the number of people dying was 300 and something yesterday. That's like an aeroplane.
An aeroplane, yeah.
Per day.
Well, and I think as well, the social impact that it's having has been massively underestimated and underspoken about, because there's people where I started a new job at the start last December, and I still hadn't met some of the people until November just gone, because we hadn't been into the office, because we hadn't interacted. The only times you're interacting with people is through a computer, and we've not seen family, we've not seen friends, and it takes a huge impact. It takes a huge toll on people. The mental health impacts, I think, are going to be with us for decades to come.
The thing I'm missing at the moment is live performance. There's not, you can't beat hearing live music. For me, you can't beat. I'm not keen on cinema, to be honest. I'm much happier with live theatre. And live music, and that's the thing. I'm starting to wonder what that was like. I remember it as being very joyous and uplifting, but that's something I've definitely missed. I can feel it. I can't wait to be able to go and do that sort of stuff again.
And even like I've not booked to go to the theatre at all this year, because I just thought, well, we're going to have to cancel it. We're going to have to arrange it, and the impact that it's having on the arts must be horrendous. Last time I went into Manchester, I walked past the Royal Exchange, and it just made me so sad, because it's not opened its doors for so long, and people haven't been able to go and learn about things and see things differently through the medium of theatre. It's horrible.
Well, without opening another Pandora's box.
Gosh.
The subjects, is it Ofqual have suggested that we downgrade the arts and music and things like that, so that they can concentrate on the really important subjects.
You mean the really important ones where we pass an exam and therefore we have got a piece of paper that says we've passed an exam?
As opposed to the creative industries that actually help the country make.
I have to say, I don't know about you, Emma, but I mean, I speak to a lot of business leaders in the work that I do, and basically they want the creative. That's who they want. They want the sparky. They want, in effect, I feel as though there's a disconnect at the moment between what the exams are telling businesses and what the real person is. There's
completely fair. I mean, I remember coming out of university and being told, you're better off getting a 2-1 than a first, because if you get a first, they'll think you're too clever and you won't get a job. But then I was doing some work when we first met, actually, wasn't I? Look at how do you give children the skills that they need to enter the workplace? Because the exams are one thing. They say, yes, you can learn to pass an exam, but have they got the social skills that they need? Have they got the confidence to interact with people that they've never spoken before to? Can they facilitate, or can they learn how to facilitate? Can they think about things creatively? If all they've been told is this plus this equals this, and therefore you do this and you do this and you do the other, they've not got that innovation lens that we need to have within businesses. And it's horrible to see, because when you get people coming in that are from, they might have gone to university or they might have just come out of college, all they're used to doing is passing an exam. They're not used to having to think differently or to interact with new people, and it's really sad. It's something that I keep pushing with Parkland to say, if we've got kids that are academic, that's fantastic, but have we got kids that are prepared to go into the world and make a difference and do something meaningful? Because just because you can't pass exams as well as other people might be able to, doesn't mean you're not really good at something. You might be a great plumber, you might be a great electrician, you might be great at woodwork, you don't necessarily have to be able to do, I don't know, a physics exam in order to do that. It might help, but actually practical hands-on stuff is really useful.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to, we're renovating a house at the moment, and there's so much of it that I learned from my dad because he taught me things, but most of my generation haven't got a clue how to wire a plug, let alone put a ceiling up or, do wiring or anything like that, because we're just not taught it anymore.
No. It's really, I have to say, there are times when people say things and you think, I needed that. Emma, I needed that. Because we're making a submission to the Education Select Committee are doing an inquiry into post-16 qualifications. And they want to know what businesses think about T-levels, apprenticeships, I'm trying to remember all those A levels and stuff like that. So the thing for me is, you've confirmed with what you said what I'm hearing from others, and that's made me even more keen to make sure that message gets into that inquiry, because we've just become very academic. I mean, I said to Stan a couple of weeks ago, I think you sort of hesitated on this, Stan, so I might not be right, but we don't assess how children speak or how well they listen. I'm not at GCSE, and I don't think, the only way I could think of it was in drama or in theatre studies or something like foreign languages. But actually, we're not assessing how they do it in English. It's unbelievable, isn't it? And and you think it's not really fit for purposes. And in a way, the secondary schools, and it's sad that the primary schools go this way. The secondary schools are a bit like this sausage making machine, aren't they? We have the exams at the end. That's going to test how well we've made our sausages. So if we can get some really good sausages produced at the end of that time, then that's great. There's nothing thinking about, or not enough thinking about, well, what ingredients do we need to put into the sausage making process? How do we make these sausages? This isn't sort of really thought through. It's just, well, someone's going to give us an exam. We've got to do everything we can to get them passing that exam. Whether or not it's the right thing or not, that's not thought about.
No, really. And I think even
meanwhile, the world's turned vegan, so they don't want your sausages anyway.
Yeah,
that's a very good point, Stan. Of even higher level than that, Frank, it's what do we actually need in the country and in the world, and what skills do we need, and how do we develop those skills? Because there's so many kicks and different charitable organizations that are trying to help re-skill people for the skills that we need, but people don't understand what we need to do in the future, and therefore they're not teaching the kids at the right time. We're having to teach them later, or we're having to retrain people.
And so you've done it again, you see, because we do work with Innovate Her, don't we?
Yes, and I do.
A business that is trying to encourage more women to get into tech, particularly into digital businesses, but actually they're needed because the schools aren't doing it.
And I find it funny, my head teacher has been given, there's no one else in the school that can do computing, so she's got to teach them how to do computing, and she's the first to say, I don't have a clue how to do this, but it's part of the curriculum and therefore we've got to do it. And we know, you know yourself, Frank, we can't get people into education to teach kids how to do all the computing and coding and everything and all the different practices, because the pay is so low that they might go into industry and get paid 2, 3, 4 times that, especially if they're an engineer, because we need them so much. There's so much in demand that the price of them has just gone up massively.
Yeah, my son has just left his very stable pensioned job to go as a freelancer, and that's exactly what he does. And you understand the reasons why, because actually he's seeing people earning vast sums of money, and actually a more creative environment as well, a bit more edgy as well.
Yeah, and a lot of the time I think as well, the companies are willing to give you a lot more, not just financially, but from a well-being perspective, because they recognize that you're so in demand and you can just go anywhere. So when it comes to work-life balance, you get a completely different life than you'd get if you were teaching or if you were going into one of the more traditional outlets.
Well, back to the exams though, don't we need something that's more rounded by way of this is the output from this school? It's not just GCSEs or SATs results, it's GCSEs plus This is what they've done in terms of their ability to work as a group. This is how they've
this is the work they've done in the community. This is how they've helped where they live.
And those should have, I'm not saying they're equally balanced, but there should be an element of balance in that.
But that's what businesses want, though, Stan, isn't it? That's the dimension that, that's what they want to see on a CV.
And a big thing is as well, do the kids, and I know that, even most generations now won't have a clue, but do they know what they want to do with their lives or what they want with their life? It's not to say I want to do this job and this job and this job, but actually, a lot of the people that I've coached, we talk about a lifeline that says, what environments do you enjoy? What environments don't you enjoy? What are you good at? What motivates you? What doesn't motivate you? What do you want from your life? What do you envision life being? And how do we help you to get to that point through different jobs? None of that thinking is done at a school level. It's certainly not done within businesses very well. But without that, you just end up with a lot of talent that's kind of drifting. Because you might be given an opportunity or another opportunity and you move around, but it's not necessarily with a clear direction or a focus.
We had, this is the issue with T levels, and we're going to have to finish in a minute, but at 16, children are being expected to sort of, I know that 80% of the T level is academic, but actually it's driving you towards, digital or healthcare or whatever. And actually most kids at 16 have no bloody idea what they want to do. And the great thing about A levels and going to university is that your options, unless you do a sort of medical course or your whatever, your options stay fairly broad. You can sort of shift and move around. But actually, those who go down those T levels or going, I really feel, or even go into an apprenticeship, which, I don't know. I mean, I wanted to be a draftsman. I have no idea what a draftsman did, but I just like the name. So you think, well, and actually, I know it sounds crazy now, but I speak to young people and they're exactly the same. I haven't got a clue what they want to do.
Or they say, I want to do this thing because I've seen someone else I know doing it. And that's the whole see me to be me piece that's so important. And saying it's fine to not know what you want to do, but what do you enjoy practically doing? Like, do you like talking to people, or is that your idea of hell? Do you like spending time facilitating sessions and getting people to think about stuff? Do you like sitting and playing with Excel? Because most kids won't have used Microsoft or Excel already.
Don't get me on.
They can't come into work and do anything. You've got to teach them how to do it. But it means it's harder to employ them because you're starting from nothing. And that's not to say that companies shouldn't employ them, but it puts more pressure on you to do the right thing as opposed to the easy thing.
Yeah. I cannot understand how a system, I mean, we still have, when we used to do work experience in the co-op, year 10s coming in, never sent an email to anybody.
Yeah. They don't know how to attach a file.
They can produce a lovely little TikTok film, but can't send a bloody email. And then also, and I remember a young man who was working in the finance team there saying, I said, how's this work experience going? And he was really troubled by it. And he said, well, I can't use Excel well enough. And you think, well, I said, well, have you been taught Excel? Well, no, not really.
So that's why you can't use it.
And that's why you can't do it. It's not about you.
Yeah,
I'm saying it's not you. You're not at fault here.
Yeah, completely frank. That's where the confidence bit comes in, and I've got rainbows, brownies and guides in Partington, and a lot of the girls genuinely think I can't do this because they've never done it. It's not that they can't do it, it's that they've not learned it yet. And a big thing for me is how do we not just children but also the whole of the UK to start having more of a learning culture where I'm interested in that thing, I'm going to go and learn about it, and it's okay to not know it now, but I might know it in the future. It's not a bad thing to say I can't tick every single box. Actually, it's better if I can tick 4 or 5 of the boxes, but I'm really excited about learning those other things.
Yeah, I like that term. I've not learned it yet. I mean, I do like that. That's I mean, it's interesting because that submission to the inquiry, I've been looking at different sort of systems around the world, and Estonia and Czech Republic, they all talk, Singapore, they all talk about, they don't compartmentalize it into primary, secondary, post 16, further ed, higher ed. They don't do that. It's just, it feels more of a seamless journey. a life journey of learning,
I love
anyway.
that. And Edinburgh University actually does a really good set of courses that is the Office of Lifelong Learning. And I can't remember if it's free or if it's heavily subsidized, but a lot of my university friends came to university at a later point because they'd gone through the Office of Lifelong Learning. They figured out later in life that they were really interested in a topic, and then they'd started doing more about it. But I've never heard of anything similar local to us. But it's such a great idea.
Yeah. Well, that's 40 minutes gone, folks.
It always goes so fast.
I know, and I have to say, Emma, there's some real jewels in some of the comments. There are times when we're really fortunate to have guests like yourself coming on and giving your perspective. And I think guests always feel as, oh, well, it's just what I think, But actually, it is really, for me, it's uplifting and makes me think as well. So thank you for that. And thank you, Stan, for digging out all the verses of the national anthem today.
Well, some are regularly omitted, particularly the one about pushing shots.
Oh, thank
Anyway,
you.
so
It's brought great joy to the end of my week.
Well, it's been lovely having you, and we'll hopefully, all being well, we'll be back next Friday recording with another guest. So we've got guests lined up all the way. I don't think there's a week now between now and May, Stan, when it's just you and me. So
It's so popular.
I know we've actually got a Dane coming on. We've got the Dame Alison Peacock, who's in charge of the Chartered College of Teaching, is coming on. I think maybe next week, but or the week after.
You should have referenced that, Frank, with an honour of the Dame, as opposed to colloquially. We've got a Dame.
Definitely not.
When you know Alison, I mean, she will laugh at that comment as well, Stan. But yeah. Also, I was trying to remember today because I seem to think we might have had somebody who got a New Year's honour, and I was trying to remember which of the guests.
Oh, Annette has. So I know Annette that runs. Oh gosh, what are they called? I'll find the details and I'll send them to you on Twitter. But Annette's just got one for her services to technology.
Oh wow! Okay, so we'll see everybody next week, and thank you all for watching and listening, and thank you for your time. Thank you, Emma.
Everybody.